The neon sign at Sal's dry cleaning flickered like a broken promise against the November rain. I pulled my truck up to the curb, engine coughing that familiar wheeze that reminded me daily how far I'd fallen from the days when Uncle Sam paid for my transportation. These days, I fixed other people's rides while mine slowly surrendered to rust and time. "Danny, you made it," Sal called from behind the counter, his voice carrying that nervous edge I'd been hearing more often lately. The shop smelled of chemical solvents and secrets, a combination I was starting to recognize. I'd come to pick up Monica's coat, the expensive one she wore to court appearances. My wife had been working late again, or so she claimed. 3 nights this week, she'd stumbled through our front door well past midnight, offering explanations that sounded rehearsed. "Here's the thing, Danny," Sal said, glancing toward the window like he expected someone to be watching. When I was cleaning Monica's coat, I found something in the pocket. He handed me a crumpled receipt from the Grandview Motor Lodge, the kind of place where hourly rates were posted in neon and questions weren't asked. My stomach dropped like a stone in deep water. "There's more," Sal continued, producing his phone with shaking fingers. "I wasn't snooping, I swear, but when a text came through on Monica's phone, she left it here by accident last week. I couldn't help but see." The message thread made everything crystal clear. Monica and someone named Victor had been exchanging texts that left nothing to imagination. Plans for meetings, intimate details, and worst of all, jokes about how clueless I was. "Who's Victor?" I asked, though my gut already knew this wouldn't be good news. "Victor Castellano. Runs that fancy car dealership downtown, Prestige Motors. Word is he's got connections to some unsavory characters, if you catch my meaning." I caught his meaning perfectly. My wife wasn't just cheating, she was cheating with someone dangerous. The drive home felt like navigating through fog. Our house, the one we'd bought when Monica first made partner at her law firm, looked different now. The windows seemed to watch me with accusation, and the perfectly manicured lawn felt like a stage set for a play I'd never auditioned for. Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Monica was in the kitchen when I walked in, still wearing her power suit, sipping wine like she didn't have a care in the world. "How was your day?" she asked without looking up from her phone. "Enlightening," I replied, tossing the receipt onto the granite countertop. Her face went pale, then flushed with anger rather than shame. "You're going through my things now?" Sal found it, along with some interesting text messages. Monica stood, her attorney instincts kicking in. "I don't know what you think you know, Danny, but I know you've been meeting Victor Castellano at cheap motels. I know you've been lying to me for months. What I don't know is why." She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Why? Look around, Danny. Look at yourself. When's the last time you wore something that didn't smell like motor oil? When's the last time we went somewhere that didn't embarrass me?" Her words hit harder than any physical blow. "So this is my fault?" "This is reality. I've outgrown this life, Danny. I've outgrown you." I left the house that night and drove aimlessly through the city, past the neighborhoods where I used to feel at home, past the garage where I'd built my small business from nothing. Everything looked different now, tainted by the knowledge that my life had become a joke I wasn't in on. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Back off, or you'll regret it." I stared at the message and felt something shift inside me, something I hadn't felt since my military days. The part of me that knew how to plan, how to execute, how to win. I typed back, "Regret's my middle name. Game on." The next morning brought clarity along with coffee that tasted like motor oil. I sat in my truck outside Prestige Motors, watching Victor Castellano hold court among his gleaming inventory. He was everything I wasn't, tall, polished, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a month. My phone rang. Ray's name appeared on the screen, and I answered with relief. Ray Martinez had served with me in Afghanistan, and he'd transitioned to civilian life better than most. He owned a boxing gym downtown and had been telling me for years to stop by. "Danny, you sound like hell," Ray said after I explained the situation. "Feel worse than I sound. Come by the gym. We need to talk and you need to hit something." The gym occupied the bottom floor of a converted warehouse, all exposed brick and industrial lighting. Ray had built something solid here, a place where people came to sweat out their problems and find their strength. "Marriage problems?" Ray asked, wrapping my hands for the heavy bag. "Marriage ending," I corrected, "but not on her terms." Ray paused in his wrapping. "Danny, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking she made her choice. Now I get to make mine." The heavy bag absorbed my frustration for an hour while Ray watched and occasionally offered technique corrections. When I finally stopped, my knuckles ached, and my head felt clearer than it had in months. "Feel better?" Ray asked. "Feel focused?" That evening, I returned to Prestige Motors after closing time. The security system was standard commercial grade, nothing I couldn't handle with the right approach. My military training had included skills the Army preferred not to advertise, and some abilities never fade. The lot was quiet except for the distant hum of traffic. I made my way to Victor's personal vehicle, a black BMW that screamed compensation issues. The tracking device I'd purchased online that morning attached easily to the undercarriage. But I wasn't finished. I pulled out my keys and dragged them along the passenger side, creating a jagged line that would cost thousands to repair. Then I left a note under the windshield wiper. "I know what you did. Game on." The security guard's flashlight swept the lot just as I reached the fence line. I dropped and rolled behind a delivery truck, my heart pounding with an excitement I hadn't felt in years. This was what I'd been missing, the thrill of the mission, the satisfaction of taking action. I made it back to my truck without incident and drove home feeling more alive than I had in months. Monica was asleep when I slipped into the house, or pretending to be. Either way, I had work to do. The tracking device transmitted to an app on my phone, showing Victor's movements in real time. Over the next few days, I learned his patterns. Morning coffee at an upscale cafe, lunch meetings at expensive restaurants, and twice-weekly visits to a luxury apartment complex across town. On Thursday, I followed the signal to that apartment building and waited. Monica's car pulled into the parking garage 20 minutes after Victor's BMW. They emerged from the elevator an hour later, looking satisfied and careless. I took photos with my phone's zoom lens. Not for blackmail, I wasn't that kind of person, but for documentation. Evidence has a way of becoming useful when you least expect it. Friday brought an interesting development. While monitoring Victor's movements, I noticed he'd stopped at Sal's dry cleaning shop. The visit lasted 30 minutes, far too long for a simple pickup. I confronted Sal that evening after he'd closed the shop. "You're in business with him," I said, not asking. Sal's nervous energy confirmed my suspicion before he spoke. "Danny, you don't understand. Victor, he's not someone you say no to." "What kind of business?" "Money stuff. Clean money goes in, dirty money comes out. I just process the paperwork, handle the transactions. Monica set it up. She knew I needed the extra income." The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. Sal had been my friend, or so I'd thought. Monica hadn't just cheated on me. She'd corrupted everyone around us. "How long?" I asked. 6 months, maybe more. "Danny, I'm sorry. I never wanted to hurt you." I left Sal standing in his shop, surrounded by other people's dirty laundry, and drove home to plan my next move. The tracking device showed Victor was at the apartment complex again. Monica had texted earlier, claiming she'd be working late at the office. My phone buzzed with another anonymous message. "Last warning. Walk away." This time, I didn't respond with words. I responded with action. Saturday morning, I put my plan into motion. The beauty of owning a garage is having access to tools and knowledge that most people lack. I also had something Victor and Monica didn't expect: patience learned from years of military operations. Sal's dry cleaning shop had become ground zero for their money laundering operation, which made it my first target. I'd spent Friday evening researching the building's systems, and Saturday's pre-dawn hours executing Phase 1. The shop's main cleaning equipment ran on a delicate balance of pressure, temperature, and chemical flow. Adjusting any one component could create expensive problems. Adjusting all three would create chaos. I entered through the rear service door, using skills that felt rusty but reliable. The security system was older than my truck and twice as predictable. Inside, the familiar smell of solvents couldn't mask what I now recognized as the scent of corruption. The industrial washing machines were my first stop. A few adjustments to the pressure regulators would cause them to overflow during the next heavy cycle. The dry cleaning equipment required more finesse. I loosened key fittings just enough to create leaks that would worsen over time. But the real masterpiece was the financial records. Sal kept everything in an old filing cabinet that opened with minimal persuasion. I photographed documents that detailed transactions between Victor's dealership and various shell companies. Monica's legal letterhead appeared on several incorporation papers. I didn't steal anything. That would be wrong. I simply documented everything and made sure certain information would find its way to people who'd appreciate knowing about unlicensed financial services in their neighborhood. By sunrise, I was back home, cooking breakfast and waiting for the show to begin. The first call came at 9:30. Sal, panicked and barely coherent, explaining that his shop was flooding and his equipment was malfunctioning. The second call, an hour later, was even better. Apparently, some of Victor's business associates had received anonymous tips about money being laundered through a dry cleaning operation. I spent the day at my garage working on legitimate repairs and monitoring the tracking device. Victor's BMW moved frantically between his dealership, Sal's shop, and various locations I didn't recognize. The pattern suggested damage control, which meant my plan was working. Monica came home that evening in a fury I'd never seen before. "What did you do?" she demanded, still wearing her court attire but looking disheveled. "Fixed some cars, balanced some books. You know, work stuff. Sal's shop is ruined. The equipment, the records, everything's a mess." I looked up from my newspaper with practiced innocence. "That's terrible. Insurance should cover equipment failure, though." Her eyes narrowed. "This wasn't an accident." "Prove it." She couldn't, of course. I'd been careful to make everything look like mechanical failure and unfortunate coincidence. The anonymous tips about money laundering could have come from anyone: disgruntled customers, competing businesses, concerned citizens. "You're playing with fire, Danny. Victor isn't someone you want as an enemy." Good thing I'm not afraid of getting burned. That night, Monica packed a bag and left for what she claimed was a business trip. The tracking device told a different story. Victor's BMW was parked at the luxury apartment complex, and it stayed there all night. Sunday brought Phase 2 of my plan. The annual Riverside Community Festival was the social event of the season, where everyone who mattered in our small city came to see and be seen. Monica and Victor would be there, playing the happy couple while thinking they were untouchable. I arrived early and positioned myself strategically. The festival's public address system was operated by volunteers who were more enthusiastic than security conscious. During the afternoon lull, while everyone was focused on the pie-eating contest, I made some modifications to the audio equipment. When the evening program began, I was ready. Monica and Victor sat at a prominent table, surrounded by other lawyers and business owners. They looked confident, untouchable, like people who'd never faced real consequences. The festival organizer took the microphone to introduce the evening's speakers. Instead of his voice, the crowd heard a recording I'd made from the photos of Sal's financial documents. "Ladies and gentlemen," my voice echoed across the festival grounds, "let me tell you about some interesting business partnerships in our community." I detailed the money laundering operation, naming names and providing specifics. I described how a respected attorney had used her legal expertise to create shell companies for a car dealer with questionable associates. I explained how a neighborhood dry cleaner had been turned into a financial washing machine. The crowd's reaction was everything I'd hoped for. Gasps, murmurs, and pointing fingers, all directed toward Monica and Victor's table. They sat frozen, unable to run without confirming their guilt, unable to stay without enduring the humiliation. But I wasn't finished. And here's the really interesting part, my recorded voice continued. This same attorney has been cheating on her husband, meeting her criminal boyfriend at cheap motels while her husband works honest jobs to pay for her expensive lifestyle. The festival grounds went silent except for my voice detailing their affair with clinical precision. I didn't use crude language or make emotional appeals. I simply presented facts with the same tone Monica used in court. When the recording ended, the real microphone crackled back to life. The festival organizer, clearly flustered, tried to resume the program, but the damage was done. Monica and Victor were surrounded by stares, whispers, and the kind of social judgment that destroys reputations in small cities. They left quickly, Victor's hand on Monica's back as they pushed through the crowd. But I could see the anger in their movements, the way they avoided eye contact with people they'd considered friends. My phone buzzed with a text from Monica. "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." I typed back, "The night's still young." Monday morning brought consequences I hadn't anticipated. My garage's front window was spider-webbed with cracks, and someone had spray-painted "snitch" across the metal siding. The message was clear. Victor wasn't planning to take my public humiliation quietly, but two could play the escalation game. I called Ray and explained the situation. He arrived within an hour, bringing coffee and the kind of calm presence that had made him valuable in combat situations. "You've got their attention," he observed, examining the damage. "That was the point. Question is, what's your endgame? Because this is about to get serious." Ray was right. Victor's response showed he was willing to move beyond financial games into territory that could turn dangerous. I needed to finish this before it spiraled beyond my control. The tracking device showed Victor's BMW at his dealership, probably planning his next move. I had advantages he didn't know about: military training, insider knowledge of his routines, and most importantly, nothing left to lose. That afternoon, I visited Victor's world directly. Prestige Motors occupied a full city block, all glass and chrome designed to intimidate customers into spending more than they could afford. I walked in wearing my best clothes, which admittedly weren't impressive, and asked to speak with the owner about purchasing a luxury vehicle. Victor emerged from his office like a predator sensing prey. Up close, he was even more imposing. 6'3", expensively dressed, with the kind of confidence that comes from never facing real opposition. "You must be Danny," he said, extending a hand I didn't shake. "Monica's told me so much about you." "I'm sure she has. Nice operation you've got here." "Business is good. Of course, some ventures are more profitable than others." He was taunting me, confident in his superiority. That confidence would be his downfall. "I'm interested in something special," I said. "Something that makes a statement." Victor's eyes lit up with the prospect of an expensive sale. He led me to the premium section, where cars cost more than most people's houses. As he talked about features and financing, I memorized the layout, security cameras, and employee positions. "This one's my personal favorite," Victor said, stopping beside a red sports car that looked like it belonged in a movie. Custom paint, hand-stitched interior, 0 to 60 in under 4 seconds. "How much? For you? Special price? 200,000. I whistled appreciatively. "That's serious money. Serious men drive serious cars. Of course, some people prefer to stay in their lane, drive their little trucks, fix other people's problems." The insult was delivered with a smile, but the message was unmistakable. Victor's condescension dripped from every word, as if I were nothing more than a minor nuisance, someone to be brushed aside, a fly to be swatted. His gaze told me I wasn't worth his attention. "You're right," I said, my voice steady, though a smirk tugged at the corner of my mouth. "Some people know their place." I could feel the weight of Victor's arrogance, but it didn't bother me. In fact, it was fuel. I left the dealership with his smugness ringing in my ears, the entire scope of his operation now clear in my mind. That night, as I sat at home, the plan came together. One that would use his overconfidence, his belief that he was untouchable, against him. Wednesday evening, after the dealership had closed its doors for the night, I returned. The building was quiet, the parking lot empty, but I knew better than to think the security system would be easy to bypass. This wasn't some back-alley operation like Sal's shop. It was a well-funded business, with a sophisticated setup. Still, it wasn't beyond my abilities. I'd spent the entire Tuesday researching the company that installed the system. Their default passwords? Shockingly predictable. Too predictable, in fact. Victor's personal sports car sat in the showroom, gleaming under the showroom lights. It was more than just a car. It was a symbol of excess, a display of the life he lived at others' expense. I spent the next hour with it, not trying to destroy it, but making subtle adjustments. Modifications that would go unnoticed until the moment the engine was started. Nothing dangerous, nothing that would put anyone at risk, but definitely expensive, definitely humiliating. The other vehicles in the showroom weren't spared either. I took a similar approach with them, loosened oil drain plugs, disconnected battery cables, and for good measure, a little sugar in the gas tanks. Classic, harmless pranks that would cause maximum inconvenience when it came time for repairs. The damage wouldn't be visible right away, but the costs? Oh, the costs would be astronomical. But it wasn't just the cars I was after. The real masterpiece of the night was Victor's office. The computer was password protected, but that didn't stop me. His filing cabinets were far more revealing than I could have ever hoped. There they were. Neatly organized contracts with shell companies, financial records detailing large cash transactions, and, most interestingly, correspondence with individuals whose names I had seen before in newspaper crime reports. The pieces of the puzzle clicked together. I didn't hesitate. I photographed everything, every incriminating document, and uploaded the images to a secure cloud account. Then, as the clock ticked past midnight, I prepared my packages, one for the local newspaper, one for the state attorney general's office, and several others for federal agencies specializing in financial crimes. Everything was ready, and there would be no turning back. Thursday morning, I watched from across the street, barely able to contain my satisfaction. It didn't take long for Victor to realize something was wrong. The first sign of trouble came when his prized sports car refused to start for the morning test drive. He cursed loudly, but I was just getting started. Soon after, more cars in the showroom began exhibiting problems. Problems that seemed to affect every single vehicle at the worst possible moment. Customers arrived for their appointments, only to be greeted by chaos. Mechanics scrambled to diagnose the issues, but nothing made sense. Every car seemed to have a different problem, and none of them were easily fixable. By noon, the dealership was in full crisis mode. Victor was pacing the showroom floor, barking orders at anyone who would listen, his face flushed with frustration. He looked like a man watching his empire slowly crumble around him. His entire operation, so carefully built on deception, was unraveling in real time, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Just then, my phone rang. Monica's name flashed on the screen, and I knew exactly what was coming. "We need to talk," she said, her voice flat, almost rehearsed. "I'm listening," I replied, curiosity piqued. "Not over the phone. Meet me at Riverside Park, by the pavilion. 1 hour." I raised an eyebrow, a small chuckle escaping me. "This should be interesting," I muttered to myself before hanging up. Victor's problems were just beginning, and now it seemed that Monica wanted to have a conversation of her own. Something told me it wasn't going to be a simple chat. The park was where we'd had our first date 15 years ago. back when Monica was a public defender who cared about justice, and I was a young veteran trying to build a life. The irony wasn't lost on me. Monica was already waiting when I arrived, sitting on the same bench where we'd shared our first kiss. She looked tired, older than her years, like someone carrying weight she couldn't put down. "You need to stop," she said as I approached. "Stop what?" "You know what. The festival, Sal's shop, Victor's dealership. This has gone far enough." I sat beside her, maintaining the distance that had grown between us over the years. "Has it? Because from where I sit, we're just getting started." "Danny, please. I know I hurt you, but this isn't the answer. What would you suggest? Counseling? Forgiveness? Pretending none of this happened?" She turned to face me, and for a moment, I saw the woman I'd married. "I suggest you remember that we loved each other once." We did. But love isn't enough when one person decides the other isn't worth staying faithful to. It was a mistake, a stupid, selfish mistake, but it doesn't have to destroy everything. I stood, looking down at the woman who'd shared my bed for 15 years and my secrets for even longer. You're right. It doesn't have to destroy everything, just the parts that were built on lies. As I walked away, Monica called after me. "Victor isn't going to let this continue. He's not like you, Danny. He doesn't have limits." I turned back to her. "Then he's about to learn that neither do I." Friday brought revelations that changed everything I thought I knew about my situation. I was reviewing the photographs from Victor's office when I noticed something that made my stomach turn cold. Correspondence between Victor and someone I'd trusted completely. Tessa Morrison had been Monica's college roommate and maid of honor at our wedding. She'd been a regular guest at our dinner table, a shoulder for Monica to cry on during difficult cases, and someone I'd considered family. The letters in Victor's files told a different story. Tessa hadn't just known about the affair. She'd orchestrated it. The correspondence went back 18 months, detailing a plan to destroy my marriage and my business. Tessa had introduced Monica to Victor, encouraged the relationship, and provided legal advice for the money laundering operation. But the most shocking revelation was her motivation. 5 years ago, I'd discovered that Tessa was embezzling from the nonprofit organization where she worked as financial director. Instead of reporting her immediately, I'd given her a chance to return the money and resign quietly. She'd seemed grateful at the time, thanking me for protecting her reputation and career. Apparently, gratitude wasn't what she'd been feeling. Her letters to Victor detailed years of planning, waiting for the right opportunity to destroy my life as thoroughly as I'd destroyed hers. Monica had been the perfect weapon, successful, ambitious, and increasingly dissatisfied with our blue-collar lifestyle. I sat in my truck outside Tessa's upscale neighborhood, reading her words and feeling something shift inside me. Monica's affair had been painful, but it was almost understandable. Marriages fail, people grow apart, attraction fades. But Tessa's calculated manipulation was something else entirely. She lived in a colonial-style house that screamed suburban success, complete with manicured lawn and luxury cars in the driveway. Her husband worked in finance, her children attended private schools, and her social media presence painted the picture of a perfect family life. That perfection was about to develop some cracks. I started with research, spending the weekend learning everything about Tessa's current life. She'd rebuilt her career as a financial consultant, specializing in nonprofit management. The irony was almost too perfect. Her client list included several prominent charities and community organizations. Monday morning, I began making phone calls. "Hello, this is Danny Mitchell from the Better Business Bureau," I said to the first organization on Tessa's client list. "We're conducting a routine review of financial consultants in the area, and Tessa Morrison's name came up. Have you had any concerns about her services?" The conversation that followed was enlightening. Tessa's current clients had noticed irregularities in their accounts. Nothing major, just small discrepancies that could be explained away as accounting errors. But when I mentioned her history of financial impropriety, suddenly those small errors looked more suspicious. I made similar calls throughout the week, always identifying myself honestly and providing factual information about Tessa's past. I wasn't lying or creating false evidence. I was simply ensuring that people had all the relevant information about someone handling their money. By Friday, Tessa's client base was asking uncomfortable questions. Her husband's financial firm was conducting an internal review of her activities. Her children's private school was reconsidering her position on the fundraising committee, but I wasn't finished. Saturday evening, I attended the annual charity gala, where Tessa served as the master of ceremonies. She stood at the podium in an expensive gown, thanking donors and announcing fundraising totals, looking like the epitome of civic virtue. I waited until she finished her speech, then approached the microphone during the open comment period. "Thank you, Tessa, for that inspiring presentation," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the hotel ballroom. "I think everyone here would be interested to know about your other inspiring work, specifically your role in orchestrating affairs, money laundering operations, and systematic financial fraud." The ballroom went silent. Tessa's face drained of color as I continued. 5 years ago, Tessa Morrison embezzled over $50,000 from the Children's Hope Foundation. Instead of facing prosecution, she was allowed to resign quietly and make restitution. Since then, she's rebuilt her career while secretly planning revenge against the person who exposed her crimes. I pulled out printed copies of her correspondence with Victor, holding them up for the crowd to see. These letters detail 18 months of planning to destroy my marriage, corrupt my wife, and involve her in criminal activities, all because I had the audacity to report financial crimes instead of ignoring them. The crowd's murmur grew louder as people processed what they were hearing. Tessa stood frozen at the head table, unable to deny evidence she couldn't have known I possessed. "The woman you've trusted with your charitable donations, your fundraising efforts, and your community organizations is the same person who spent years plotting to destroy an innocent family for personal revenge." I placed the letters on the registration table and walked toward the exit. "I thought you should know who you're really dealing with." The ballroom erupted in conversation as I left. Tessa's carefully constructed new life was crumbling in real time, and this time, there would be no quiet resignation or private restitution. My phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You just signed your own warrant. This ends now." I typed back, "Bring it on." Sunday morning brought an unexpected visitor. I was working on an engine rebuild in my garage when Monica's car pulled into the driveway. She emerged looking haggard, like someone who hadn't slept in days. "We need to end this," she said without preamble. "I agree. When are you filing for divorce?" "That's not what I mean. Victor's planning something, Danny. Something that goes beyond property damage and public embarrassment." I set down my wrench and gave her my full attention. "What kind of something?" "He's got connections, people who solve problems permanently. Tessa convinced him that you're too dangerous to leave alone." The implication hung between us like smoke from a fire neither of us could control. "So what do you suggest?" "Meet with them. Tonight. Riverside Park, by the old pavilion. Work out some kind of agreement." I studied my wife's face, looking for tells I'd learned to recognize over 15 years of marriage. She was scared, but not just for me. She was scared of what she'd gotten herself into. "This is Tessa's idea, isn't it?" Monica nodded reluctantly. "She says it's the only way to end this without someone getting seriously hurt." "And you believe her, after everything she's done?" "I don't know what to believe anymore, but I know Victor's not bluffing about his connections." That evening, I prepared for what might be my final confrontation. I called Ray and explained the situation, asking him to monitor police scanners and be ready to call for help if I didn't check in by midnight. "This is a bad idea," Ray said. "Let me come with you." "Can't. They specified I come alone, and I don't want to give them an excuse to escalate. Danny, these aren't playground bullies. If Victor's got the connections Monica thinks he does, then I better be smarter than they expect. I arrived at Riverside Park 30 minutes early, using the time to scout the area and position myself strategically. The old pavilion sat in a depression surrounded by trees, offering good cover but limited escape routes. If this was going to be an ambush, they'd chosen their location well. Monica arrived first, followed by Victor's BMW and a sedan I didn't recognize. Tessa emerged from the sedan, looking nothing like the polished socialite I'd humiliated at the charity gala. Her expensive clothes were wrinkled, her makeup smeared, and her usual composure had been replaced by barely controlled rage. "Danny!" Victor called as they approached. "Thanks for coming." "Wouldn't miss it, though I have to say, the location seems a bit dramatic for a business meeting." Tessa stepped forward, her voice shaking with fury. "You destroyed everything I built. My career, my reputation, my family's standing in the community. I exposed the truth. If that destroyed your life, maybe you should have made better choices." "Better choices?" She laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You mean like keeping quiet about other people's mistakes? Like minding my own business?" "I mean like not stealing from children's charities." Victor moved closer, his bulk casting a shadow in the dim park lighting. "Here's how this works, Danny. You're going to publicly apologize for the lies you've spread about all of us. You're going to compensate us for the damage you've caused, and then you're going to disappear." "Disappear?" "Leave town. Start over somewhere else. We'll even help with relocation expenses." I looked at the three people who'd conspired to destroy my marriage and my life, and I felt something settle into place. A calm certainty I hadn't experienced since my military days. "Counteroffer," I said. "You confess to your crimes, make full restitution to everyone you've cheated, and accept the consequences of your actions like adults." Tessa's composure finally snapped. "You sanctimonious piece of trash. You think you're better than everyone else, don't you? The righteous veteran, the honest mechanic, the faithful husband. Compared to you three? Yeah, I do." Victor stepped forward, close enough that I could smell his expensive cologne. "You're not walking away from this, Danny. One way or another, this ends tonight." "You're right," I said, pulling out my phone. "It does end tonight." I pressed a button on my phone's screen, and in that instant, the emergency lighting system in the park sprang to life. It was a sudden flood of bright white light that instantly illuminated the area, chasing away all the dark corners where secrets had once hidden. The motion sensors I'd carefully installed earlier that day were activated by a remote signal, flooding the pavilion area with light. It was as if the very air had changed, charged with the reality of what was about to happen. Victor looked around in confusion, his voice starting to rise. "What the hell?" he began, eyes wide as he tried to make sense of the sudden shift in atmosphere. "Insurance," I said calmly, watching the panic start to settle into their faces. "You see, I've been recording every word of this conversation, and those lights, they're not just for visibility, they're triggering the security cameras I installed this afternoon. You didn't even notice them, did you?" I raised my phone, the screen glowing with multiple live video feeds from every angle of the park. "Every single word you've said tonight, every threat, every admission of criminal activity, every conspiracy, you name it, it's all being recorded and automatically uploaded to a secure server right as we speak, all of it. It's out of your hands now." Monica, who had been silent up until that moment, stared at me with a look that I couldn't quite place. Maybe it was admiration, maybe something else. I wasn't sure, but I wasn't interested in analyzing it just then. She simply said, "You planned this." I nodded slowly, keeping my eyes on Victor and Tessa, watching them try to keep their composure. "I learned from the best," I said. "Tessa taught me that revenge isn't something you rush. It's a dish best served after meticulous planning and careful preparation. You never act on impulse. You wait until everything is in place. And now everything is in place." Victor, growing more agitated, moved his hand toward his jacket, likely thinking he could grab for something hidden inside. But I was ready for that, and I wasn't about to let him get the upper hand now. "I wouldn't do that," I said, my voice steady and calm, even as the tension in the air grew thick enough to cut with a knife. "Ray's watching from the tree line. He has a clear shot, and if anyone makes even the smallest move toward violence, he's under strict orders to call the police immediately." "And those cameras?" I gestured toward the now visible security cameras. "They're monitored by a professional security company. They've already been alerted to potential criminal activity happening right here. They're watching everything unfold in real time. You're trapped." The three of them stood frozen, the reality of their situation starting to set in. Their trap, which they had thought was for me, had suddenly turned into their own cage. They were now the prey, and they could see that. "Here's what's going to happen next," I continued, my voice unflinching as I laid out the terms. "Monica's going to file for divorce, and she'll accept whatever settlement I offer her. Victor, you're going to close down your money laundering operation, and you're going to find yourself a new line of work. Tessa, you're going to turn yourself in to the authorities and make full restitution to every organization you've defrauded over the years." Tessa's eyes narrowed as she processed the situation. Then, after a beat, she asked, "And what if we refuse? What happens then?" I didn't hesitate for a second. "Then the recordings go public. All of it. Every last detail, every financial document I've gathered, every incriminating word you've said, it goes out for everyone to see. The FBI gets a copy. The state attorney general gets a copy. And the local newspaper. They'll get an exclusive story about the corruption that's been festering right under our noses in this quiet little town." Victor's jaw clenched with barely contained rage, but I could see the wheels turning in his head. He was smart enough to recognize when he had been outplayed. "You think you've won?" he sneered, his voice tight with frustration. "I think I've survived," I replied evenly, my gaze unwavering. "And sometimes surviving is the only victory you need. Winning comes in many forms, and I'm still standing when you thought I'd be buried by your lies." I slowly backed toward my truck, all the while keeping the phone's camera trained on them. "You have 48 hours, I called out, my tone final. 48 hours to start making things right. After that, I release everything. No more games, no more negotiating. You'll face the consequences, whether you like it or not." As I got in my truck and pulled away, I couldn't help but glance in the rearview mirror. There they were, three people who had thought they were predators, now realizing they'd been hunting someone far more dangerous than they ever imagined. They were staring into the light, and it was no longer a friend. My phone buzzed with a message from Ray. "Clean getaway. You okay?" I quickly typed back, "Better than okay. I'm free." For the first time in what felt like forever, I was driving home to a house that felt like mine again. The marriage was over, the friendships had revealed their true colors, and the lies that had once bound me were now exposed for all to see. But I had survived, with my integrity intact. Sometimes, that's all you really need. It wasn't about vengeance. It was about justice, about standing tall when the world tried to push you down. The story didn't end in violence or tragedy. It ended with the truth finally dragged out into the light, where it could no longer be hidden. And in that light, I saw a path forward, a path to rebuilding, to healing, and to finally moving on. It was over, and I was free.